For most Black Americans, especially those in the South, the front porch isn't just part of the entry into the house. It is the place we enter community. It's not just the comfort or safety we experience there, but it's where we do some people watching and good reflection. On the front porch is where we tell the truth with a little sweetener and an awesome time along the way. We take what we learn and we act. On this episode, we discuss all things related to youth, education, community, and the politics of people.
How do you preach on Sundays and then ignore our children Monday through Saturday? How do we encourage them? How do we get back to that?
I'm gonna jump in real quick. So my father is a retired minister with the United Methodist Church. So I'm gonna preference that this entire whatever I say with that. All right, number one, you talked about your father and the courage that he had. I'm really big on a few things. And one, I'll say accountability is power. Accountability is power, but courage is the highway to accountability. Right? So keep that in mind as we continue this conversation. When it comes to our faith-based and community leaders and the accountability piece, we must also recognize that we live and we are all children of capitalism, right? And the poison there that comes from capitalism, right? So I grew up in a space where I saw my father walk up the street in Mechanicsville and in Pittsburgh as a preacher. I can say what I want to say now because he's retired, but he would walk up the street in the hood with, whatever he had on his side. And he was talking to everybody. He was talking to our drug dealers, our prostitutes, everyone. And he was inviting them to church. But you know what I saw when I got to church? I saw people toot their nose up. I saw people say, "Oh, what are you doing? Why are they here?" You see, this is that dehumanization that I was telling you about. So then it becomes a courage thing. As a leader, what do? Do you have the conversation or do you fall and say, "Oh, well, you're right"? Because if you have a hard conversation with your congregation, sometimes you won't have that church anymore and you'll be in a hotel. And your son will be sleeping on a box spring because you had a real hard conversation, but it was worth it. So when we talk about having these courageous conversations and the accountability and the power that comes from accountability, we have to hold them accountable. And we have to be willing to risk our livelihood and comfort for the betterment of our people. I quit my sales job where I had 3 cars, a BMW at that, one of them, so I could be a teacher. And I immediately lost my car because I couldn't afford it. And I'm fine with that. Not too many people are. And I don't blame anybody, and I'm not downing anyone for that. But what I am saying is, in order for you to be a real leader, there comes a time for you to sacrifice and have hard conversations in the face of whatever comes with it. I used to tell my students, and I'm done, I've always been a man who was with it. Meaning I'm going to do and say what needs to be said and deal with the consequences that come after it. That means I get jumped. Oh, that's okay. I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu now. I kid, no, but I do.
Yeah, look, I think that the most insidious part of the policies of things like redlining and discrimination, segregation, whether we see it show up in housing and finance, and how neighborhood design and the economy generally is the impact that it has had on our community. And I don't mean like generally. I mean that in the specific sense of the word on community. Because when you take housing, for example, and displacement caused by gentrification, the most insidious part about displacement isn't necessarily somebody moving out of their home, but moving away from their neighbor, right? And moving away from their church, and moving away from the elder, and moving away, and being pushed out of everything that they have known. And so I flagged that because I think all of the hazing that has occurred to people of color has destroyed, or at least severely hampered, our ability to draw next to each other and rely on each other in ways that I think, candidly, like when we were like, during in the Jim Crow South, it was like, hey, look, we over here and we can't go over there, but we over here together. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so we all we got. And so I think what has happened is that, like, because of bad and intentional economic policy that has pulled us away from each other, it's created a scenario where, it becomes incredibly difficult for folks to rely on each other. It becomes incredibly difficult for, if you're thinking about, like, I grew up in a neighborhood right around the corner, and Mr. Traylor was always sitting on the front porch, and Mr. Traylor, I wasn't none of his kin, but he gonna say something to me, right? But the problem with that now is that, like, Mr. Traylor he got to pick up that second shift, right? Or that third shift, because he works a job that doesn't pay a living wage. He lives in a neighborhood that doesn't have adequate transportation options, which is also in the middle of a food desert. It's going to take him 2 or 3 hours to get to a bank. And then somebody's going to say, can you show up at the PTA meeting, right? It's like, how? Like, how? Right? And so I flag all that to say, like, we've got to be, again, going back to those systems, intentional about how we deconstruct those systems and how we rebuild them, and candidly, how we just, provide enough service to people so we rebuild that sense of community. And so I think they did a job on us, right? And so we gotta know that. And then I think we do have to call out for people inside of our churches, in our neighborhoods, who have access to resources and platforms. I think we gotta call on folks to use them. And then the last thing I'll say is that nobody gave you permission, right, to start doing what you did with young people, right? Nobody said, KaCey, go forth and be fruitful. You took agency and you decided that because it was necessary, I'm going to do what's necessary. And so we got to uplift your story and make sure you have the resources that you need. We need, like, 9 million more of you, right? And so we got to do everything we can to support you and everything that you're doing. So
I appreciate that. I do. It's part of my call, right? For as many days, and I love you, gentlemen, but some days Miss KaCey's like, yo, somebody else gonna have to tap in. But I get up and I keep going and I keep going. We're gonna wrap up with this because I don't want us to leave just always calling out what didn't go well, right? I want us to think through what is right. Because, and I've heard you and the mayor mention that a lot, Courtney, that there's a lot that's right about this city, right? Tons. I was speaking to someone today. I've been in Atlanta 25 years. More than half of my life now has been here in Atlanta. And every time I think about, do I want to move someplace else or where I would go, if it's not back home to my mama and them in Virginia Beach, there's no other place I'd rather be, right? The best and the worst of this city is mine. I own it, right? And I feel a responsibility to influence it and find a way to impact it. So with that, I want you to think about what's right about this city. What do we, need to do more of? How do we highlight the awesomeness that is Atlanta, the magical part of Atlanta? And in that, the second part of what I want you to share is, how do we connect the dots to resources? Because there are a lot of resources here. There, a lot of pockets of folks doing great things. How do we break those silos? And I mentioned the idea of resources because folks speak a lot, and I think you alluded to this a little bit, Aaron, about being hazed. And I got mine, right? And I made it. And you talked about the folks who were hazed and made it, but they didn't send the elevator back down, right? And folks are quick to talk about, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and, utilize your resources and your skills. And we're in Atlanta. So I'll insert a Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. quote here. It is cruel to tell a man to pull himself up by his bootstraps when he has no boots. And it doesn't mean that there are no boots available. It's how do you get to the boots, right? Which are the resources. So what's right about this city as we close? And how do we connect the dots to the resources so that young people and other community members alike can get to the boots? They can get to the resources.
On the resource, I take the resource part of that question first. I think, we just have to, people who have those resources, access to those resources, right? We just have to do a better job of taking those resources to the people, right? I think we got to do a better job of meeting people where they are. Like everybody can't make it to the meeting, right? Everybody can't get online, right? Everybody can't, everybody there's so many things that happen over the course of the day, particularly for those in most need, that get in the way, right? It ain't because I don't want, or it's because I can't get there, right? And so we've got to do a better job of bringing our good intention to the street level, right? Like my mom, had a saying where she talked about like you so heavenly good. I mean, you so in the clouds, earthly good or whatever. And it's like, yeah, you got a great idea and it's great policy and all of this stuff, but like, bro, just need something to eat right now. So how do we make that faster, right? And then how do we show up and knock on his door and go to his neighborhood, as opposed to setting the expectation that they come to us? And that's on an individual level. And the same thing with organizations that are doing good work on the community level. We got to do a better job of bringing resources to them. We talked about agency and listening. We got to do a better job of that as well. And then as it relates to, kind of what's right. I mean, like if we can, so Atlanta is a fascinating tale of two cities, right? Like it is everything you said, right? Widest wage gap, lowest levels of economic mobility, and incredibly high child poverty rate. And simultaneously, we have more Black businesses than any other city in the country on a pro rata basis, home to the 96 Olympics, so on and so forth, right? Like world's busiest airport and all of that stuff. We have to continue to make sure that the things that we have built actually reach the people who need the help the most. And so like it matters that, Maynard Jackson did minority participation. It matters that Ambassador Young opened up the airport and helped land the 96 Olympics. It matters that Bill Campbell did the work around housing to rebuild a crumbling housing supply. It matters that Shirley Franklin didn't let the city turn into Flint, right? Like all of those things matter, right? Like it matters that Mayor Bottoms, enacted eight can't wait, and President Obama's 21st century policing tactics. All those things matter, right? And so like we got to tell both of those stories while we continue to hold everybody accountable, those elected in office, those in the community, those folks in the pulpit, and we always got to push, right? Like there was a healthy balance that I think may have been lost in translation between like political leaders, activists, and both of those facets are absolutely necessary. Like you got to have the agitator, to use Gerald Durley's word. He get real amped about it, but like people got to keep pushing. People got to keep pushing, and so we got to keep holding folks accountable. And the answer to what's wrong, I always say there's nothing wrong with this city. It can't be solved by what's right with the city. I think Atlanta has proven that time and time again by the size of the challenges that we face, but we don't that's not that legacy isn't just passed down. We got to earn that with each successive generation. And so, ultimately, we are collectively what's right with Atlanta. And so we got to live that out through our actions, though.
That was deep, man. I'll start with what is right with Atlanta. I think that while we do have our issues, Atlanta is an example of the fight for liberation. And there is a reason why we have so many entrepreneurs. There is a reason why there's a AUC. There is a reason why there are so many affluent Black people here in Atlanta. And it is a true testament to the liberation and the war for liberation for Black people. And that with war comes casualties. And by definition, we don't want to, I'm not necessarily focusing on actual casualties, but I'm saying when we drop the ball or we have high mortality rate with Black women, or we have all of these things that are brought to light, those are casualties of war on our fight for liberation for Black people. So what Atlanta has done well is, number one, it protrudes love. This is why so many people still come here. I can go on and on with that, but I'll digress there and go back to the pieces for community and what we can do better with resources. And Brother Courtney, again, he brought up some really good points. As a community advocate and equity champion, I will say that barriers are problematic when we say that we are here to help people. If you have the resources and you say that I need my license, I need my birth certificate, I need my social security card, and I need to have a high school diploma, and I need to have, I need to know my blood type. Before,
Well, there's a lot of us.
before you can give me some food, that's crazy. Let's make it even better. So you need all of that before you can offer me a job that doesn't even pay a livable wage. And then when you step back and you ask the people who are creating these particular resources and these particular grants, what is a livable wage in Atlanta or Georgia, they don't know. People are arguing about $15 an hour and $10 an hour. These are still not livable wages. I looked at my check today, and I'm done. I'm getting hyped. I looked at my check today, and one of my jobs, because you got to have a billion jobs sometimes, one of my jobs, I barely make what the livable wage is in Georgia. One of them. The other one, they pay equitably, and I'm super happy, and they actually allow me to say what I want to say and do what I want to do. But the other one, they don't pay, I barely make the the livable wage. So when we talk about barriers and people who are marginalized and people who need help, we got to eliminate the barriers to get the resources. I had a conversation today on a grant meeting, and I said, it shouldn't be more than 3 steps for me to get help if I'm having a mental issue. I have my mental issue. I make a phone call. You tell me, okay, well, this is where you need to go. I go over to that place and then you can't help me. First off, I'm traumatized. That's why I'm having my issue. Then I get the courage to call you, which is also traumatizing. Then you tell me no, which is also traumatizing. Then you send me over here and they can't help me or they're going to see me in 2 weeks, which is even more traumatizing. We got to eliminate the barriers if we really are here to help the people. I'm done.
No, I like that, and we're closing. Sure. Mic for the.
give me both answers I need, right? Okay. Specifically, real specifically, what do we do about the kids with guns? All right. I'm a gun guy. Both of y'all know that. My parameters is, what do we do about the kids with guns without infringing on other people's rights? We ain't gotta go to the left and right about what infringement is, but let's just say, how can we get these guns out of kids' hands without taking guns away from somebody else? And my way of doing it is training them how to use guns or weapons, aiming weapons properly, right? But that ain't gonna translate very well. I know when people are riding by on Lowry and they see us out there in the grass, when they see us out there with bow and arrows, that's gonna be one thing. When they see us out there with BB guns, I know it's gonna turn. It will eventually be something else. So I don't have the words like KaCey be having, especially when people come asking. I'm just gonna tell you, these boys out here got Glock 19s with 29 round clips. You know what I'm saying? I know if I show them how to properly aim, how to properly carry a weapon, right? Once I also know they have weapons that they've never even shot until they pull it out in defense, till they use it for the first time. If they see the destructive nature of that beforehand, a lot of times that's going to show them, this is something I don't even want to deal with in the first place until I know what it is I'm doing. I've seen that light bulb go boom right off in their head, knowing as soon as they pull that trigger for that first time and really see that bang, they know they ain't supposed to really be having that. So my question is, how can, from the legislative side, from a government guy, and then from a guy with a gang of experience dealing with them, period.
Yeah, man. I mean, I don't know. Like the gun issue is one part of it. I mean, I do think, there are too many guns. I think our kids have too easy access to guns. That aside, though, I think Aaron talked a lot about, he used the word dehumanizing a lot. And I think we're at a place in society where it's become so easy for us to dehumanize each other that candidly we are losing the respect for life generally, right? And so I don't know that the gun thing is one part of it, right? Like, so I don't know that I have an answer for that, right? Per se. I know that we have to do a better job of creating meaning or seeing meaning in each other, right? And we have to do a better job of ensuring that our young people value not just their lives, but the lives of their neighbor, which means we got to do a better job of loving on them. We got to do a better job of listening to them. We got to do a better job of supporting them. We got to do a better job of creating good gangs, if you will, because all of those things taken together means that you matter. It means that your life matters. It means that I value you. And when that value goes away, whether it's a gun, a knife, or something else, like, I don't care anymore. Like, you are a thing to me, and you are a thing that is in my way, and that has made me angry, which is a whole nother. We got to do a better job of mental health supports and being honest about the trauma that we face and how that trauma gets passed on to our kids. And so we got to unpack that and provide those kinds of resources as well. We got to do a better job talking about de-escalation. So the gun thing, man, that you got to, in my opinion, right? Like, you got to get at that another way, right? Now, I'm sure I can tell you all day long. Now, if you ask me, if I'm downtown, I'm gonna say, like, I'm gonna have a different answer. But like, the reality, like, yeah, sure, their kids have too much access to guns. So, okay, somebody somewhere go legislate that, right? But in the meantime, I think what's most important is we gotta get back to finding ways to help them see value in themselves and each other.
Yeah, I agree 100% with ensuring that our young people are able to see each other as human beings. I definitely mentioned a lot about the dehumanization of each other because it does make it easier for someone to pull a trigger, because especially if they've never pulled a trigger before. On the flip side, I also want to elevate this idea that Black kids are not the only ones with guns. And there are other communities out here where they are teaching their children how to use guns, which goes back to the idea of not villainizing our kids. So I am a strong proponent in education is also a form of liberation. And when I say that, I mean that in its totality. One, of course, I would hope that teaching a young person how to use a gun would save the life of not only that young person, but other people as well, right? It's just logic. But I also think that it's super important for us to understand the data around how many cars are getting broken into in Atlanta and how the guns are in the cars, and it makes it super simple for people to get the guns. And then we started to really attack the social determinants of health, and then we started to understand how much a gun sells for and this, that, and the other. And then we can start talking about the dehumanization and how easy it is for me to pull a trigger because, hey, I got this gun out of the car. Hey, how many times do the police have to say, don't put your guns in your cars? Well, I put my gun in my glove compartment. Well, they're going to break in your glove compartment too. Well, I put my gun under my seat. Well, they're going to take it from under your seat too. Well, I put it in my trunk. Well, they're going to take it out of your trunk too. Why don't you not have your gun in your car? But it's easier for us to blame our kids and villainize our kids and the ones who are hungry. So they break in your car and they take your gun and they don't know what to do with the gun. And then on top of that, they are already like not in school. So they're having some other issues on top of their frontal lobe not being completely developed. On top of the fact that they don't know how to express, I am not angry, I'm frustrated, and knowing the difference between the two. So there's a whole line of things to answer your question, but I'm a strong proponent of education frees people and education can save lives.
I like it. I mean, it's true. You're right. And I think for me, what I heard both of you say goes back to the idea of there being community responsibility. Because we make the assumption that even if I do leave it in my car, you should know enough not to take it, right? But then that absolves you from the responsibility of why did you leave it in your car unlocked with the 30-round clip
and all hollows.
So there's responsibility that goes around. I'll end here. I say a lot of, in my assessment, and this is me putting my sociology hat on, is that those of us who are in position to have these conversations, influence policy, make decisions, curate resources, we do so from the standpoint of our comfortability. I remember 2 summers ago having to check an older Black man. Oh, I come from the same environment these kids come from. First of all, bro, you 50. I can always guarantee you the situation ain't the same now as it was then. That's number one, okay? Number 2, you a little too confident and cocky that you're going to be able to handle my friend twin, okay? Short version is this older gentleman was used to working with middle class Black youth who just had a little attitude problem, right? So they came in maybe a little edge, but they didn't have to worry about where they were going to sleep at night, right? Some of them were driving cars to the program. They had debit cards and were authorized users on their mama and daddy's credit cards. So those were the young people he was used to dealing with because they had a little edge, a little attitude. He thought he could handle my friend Twin. Twin, to your point, doesn't always have the words to articulate, yo, I'm in a bad headspace today. Leave me alone. What that shows up as to someone who's 50 is disrespect because Twin would get up and walk out of the room. But in Twin's mind, he is being respectful because I know enough not to say what I want to say to you. So let me remove myself from the situation. But because said adult did not give him permission to get up out his seat and leave the room, he then determined that it was disrespect. So here I come, Miss KaCey. And the older gentleman assumed that I was going to check Twin for his disrespectful behavior. And what I said to Twin in a way to continue to model respect is, Twin, give Miss KaCey a moment. And then I turned to said gentleman and said, you wrong. Not him. First of all, you came in here with an assumption of how these children were supposed to behave simply because you walked in the room. Now that may have worked for us. That's not working for a generation of young people who have essentially been raising themselves. And then here you come demanding respect simply because you got 20, 30 years on them, haven't yet asked him his name, haven't asked him, how are you doing today? Haven't asked him, is there something I can help you with? Instead, it was an immediate push and pull. As I do this work, it's more than just direct service. It's also helping to change the narrative and change the thought process of adults. Because the question I asked him is, are you trying to prove to yourself or to Twin who the adult is in the room? When do you check your ego and understand that you have to first understand where they're coming from before you even know which approach to use? And a lot of times the thing that helps me do the work that I do is I remember one thing, is that as I do my best to live my life in faith, I have yet to see anywhere in the Bible where Jesus prayed first. He met the need first. It is recorded that he asked his disciples, why are you praying when there is food to give to them? I don't need to pray about certain things if I have access to the resources to provide to these young folks. So when we can get back to understanding that the youth we will have always, and that it is our job to have an open hand and to meet their need, then we come back and we can do mental health training, and we can do gun training, and we can do education. Just like Courtney talks about Deshaun, I have Martinez and Akeem at Bethune Elementary School, first grade. When I say come in and cut the fool every single day. You knew when Martinez was coming down the hallway, he was the shortest one in the whole entire grade. Akeem would always be late. Akeem would come in late because as a first grader, he couldn't leave home until his mama woke up because she probably didn't get in the house at 2, 3 o'clock, and he had a little sister. And as a 6-year-old, he knew enough. I can't even leave the house to get on the bus until my mama is coherent enough to take my baby sister. But by the time he got to school, breakfast was over. And no one stopped long enough to say, well, maybe Akeem is acting up because Akeem is hungry. Further than that, Akeem was sharing a bed with 3 other people, some of whom wet the bed at night, sometimes getting kicked in the head and in the stomach. So here you are now, a 6-year-old who has not had a decent night's sleep, and you've come to school hungry, but folks want you to check your behavior. Martinez had some undiagnosed challenges that everybody just attributed to bad behavior. So here it is, Miss KaCey has now I got a classroom full of other kids, and every day my door would open and here comes Martinez, here comes Akeem. And one day I just stopped and I said to Martinez, child, what is it? Because I'm tired. And everybody on this hall is tired. Your mama is tired. Are you tired? What is the problem? And Martinez says to me, nobody will listen to me at 6. And so what we realized is that Martinez needed something different. Martinez is not going to sit in this chair. So Martinez would stand on the table sometimes. Sometimes he'd be under the table. Sometimes he'd be rolling on the mat. Sometimes he'd be propped up against the door. But when Martinez was in my classroom, free to do all those things, Martinez got his work done. When it was time to reintegrate into the group activities, didn't even know Martinez was in the room. He was so quiet because he could not articulate. Me sitting still frustrates me. And I have to shout my mom out, who taught school for 37 years, and I'll end here. I always ask my mother, why did you not become an administrator? Master's degree, was designated master educator for the whole entire state of Virginia. She would train other teachers. Why didn't you become an administrator? She said to me, because I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do. Now, if y'all think I'm feisty, y'all ain't met my mama. Because my mama would tell her principals what to do, how to do it, how fast to do it. And they went on about their business because they didn't want none of Joyce Venning. But her students consistently performed well because they'd be under the table, on top of the table, leaned up against the wall, rolling on the mat, because she gave them freedom to be able to find comfort in the safety that she provided in her classroom so they could receive the education that they were there to give to them. And I think about that when I think about being a person of faith and meeting the need first. And I think as community leaders, as faith leaders, as those of us who are influenced in policy, who have some level of power, whatever that sounds and looks like, we get too caught up in communicating the thought process behind why something has to be, instead of breaking down the barriers and the silos and making sure that the need gets met easily. Then you come back and we figure out, how do we now put this into effect so we can scale it? Because I wonder, just like I wonder in education, if we meet needs first and then develop policy, instead of developing policy and then trying to figure out why this don't work, we found a solution, right? It goes back to what you said at the very beginning. We didn't stop to ask the people what they needed. We just, this fits our little box, so this is what we're going to do. And then we don't see the needle moving because we won't meet the need and then write the policy. Because I say the same thing in school. Why don't we educate our children based on their learning styles and then design a test, instead of administering a test and then forcing children who have not learned anything because we haven't catered to their learning styles and then wonder why we're not moving the needle in education. So thank y'all for joining me, being a part of the conversation. I'm sure all of these things could have had their own 2-hour-long conversation, and it's not work that's going to stop anytime soon. But one of the things that I believe is right about Atlanta and what I am grateful for is for folks like the two of you, people in the room, people who are listening, I'm sure. I think if enough of us who care get together and begin to model and stop just demanding and asking, but actually doing the thing, everybody else will catch up. And if they don't, we just drag them along too. Thank y'all so much. Thanks to everyone who joined online, and we'll see you next time.